Imagine drifting into sleep as you journey back to a time when one man changed the course of history. Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, once ruled over an empire larger than any seen before. But who was he really? How did his rise impact the world we know today? Let the peaceful rhythms of history lull you into a deep sleep as we explore the fascinating life of Charlemagne from his humble beginnings to becoming the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne, also known as Charles the Great, was born around April 2nd, 747, to Pepin the Short and Bertrada of Leon. He belonged to the Carolingian dynasty, which had already made its mark in European history. Charlemagne would go on to surpass all expectations. From the very beginning, Charlemagne's life was steeped in the complexities of political alliances, family ties, and the ever-present goal of expanding the Frankish kingdom. Pepin, the Short Charlemagne's father, had been the first king of the Franks to officially hold the title, after deposing the last Merovingian king, Childeric III, with the support of the Pope. With his father's rise to power, Charlemagne's family was positioned at the very heart of European politics. As a child, Charlemagne's future seemed secure, but it was far from certain whether he would inherit the kingdom, as the concept of succession was often murky in the Frankish court. Charlemagne's early years were spent in the royal court, learning the ways of leadership, and the complexities of his kingdom, which spanned across modern-day France, Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands. When Charlemagne was around 12 years old, his father Pepin died in 768, leaving the Frankish kingdom to be divided between Charlemagne and his brother Carloman. The division of the kingdom was not an uncommon practice at the time, but it sowed seeds of rivalry. Both brothers were given control of different territories, and the division created an early tension in Charlemagne's life. Charlemagne, however, was a man of ambition, and he would soon prove that he was willing to do whatever it took to unify the Frankish realm. Charlemagne's early reign was marked by conflict with his brother. Despite being given a portion of the kingdom, Carloman quickly became a significant rival, and their disagreements often led to internal strife within the Carolingian family. Carloman's death in 771, which is still shrouded in mystery, allowed Charlemagne to consolidate power over the entire Frankish kingdom. With his brother gone, Charlemagne became the undisputed ruler. But his success wasn't solely due to the death of his sibling. Charlemagne's natural leadership skills and the support he had cultivated from the noble class set him apart as a ruler who would soon make his mark on history. During the early years of his reign, Charlemagne focused on expanding and securing his territory. He was constantly involved in military campaigns, aiming to secure the borders of his kingdom against the Saxons, Lombards, and other neighboring tribes. Charlemagne's military prowess was complemented by his strategic use of alliances, including those with the Pope and the Church. This connection would prove to be critical to his reign, as Charlemagne understood the power of religion in uniting his people and furthering his political agenda. As Charlemagne's kingdom grew, so did his sense of responsibility. He believed in the necessity of law and order, and during this time, he began to reform the Frankish legal system. Charlemagne instituted a system of local governance by sending out royal agents, known as missi dominici, to oversee the justice and welfare of his people. These reforms were revolutionary for their time. They helped establish Charlemagne as a ruler, not only of military might, but also of civil governance. Charlemagne's early life and reign set the stage for the creation of an empire that would stretch across much of Europe. From his beginnings in the court of his father to his consolidation of power after his brother's death, Charlemagne demonstrated that he was destined to be a ruler of extraordinary ambition. But his reign would soon take him beyond the Frankish kingdom, as Charlemagne sought to unite all of Christendom under his rule. This quest for empire and religious unity would eventually lead him to a defining moment in history: crowning of Charlemagne as the Holy Roman Emperor. The rise of Charlemagne to the heights of power was not a sudden event, but rather the result of a series of strategic decisions, military campaigns, and political alliances. Charlemagne inherited a kingdom from his father Pepin the Short that was already established, but it was also fractured. The Frankish Empire was divided, and Charlemagne's initial task was to unify it under his rule. His ability to achieve this would define much of his reign. As mentioned earlier, Charlemagne shared the throne with his brother Carloman. But the relationship between the two brothers was far from harmonious. Carloman, who had been given control over the southern part of the Frankish kingdom, did not have the same ambition as Charlemagne, and their differences quickly became apparent. While Charlemagne sought to expand the kingdom, Carloman was more interested in maintaining the status quo. This divide weakened the kingdom and prevented the Frankish Empire from reaching its full potential. Despite their differences, the brothers managed to govern peacefully for a few years. But their rivalry was always present, simmering just beneath the surface. The untimely death of Carloman in 771 brought a sudden change to the political landscape. Charlemagne, now the sole ruler of the Frankish kingdom, wasted no time in consolidating his power. The death of his brother left a power vacuum that Charlemagne was quick to fill. But the real test of his leadership was still ahead. His first challenge came in the form of the Saxons, a group of Germanic tribes who lived in the northern part of his empire. The Saxons had long been a thorn in the side of the Franks, and Charlemagne knew that if he were to maintain control of his vast kingdom, he would have to secure the northern borders. Charlemagne's military campaigns against the Saxons were fierce and brutal. For nearly 30 years, Charlemagne led campaigns to subdue the Saxon tribes, incorporating them into his empire. The Saxons were a resilient people, and they put up fierce resistance to Charlemagne's expansion. Despite this, Charlemagne was relentless. He imposed a harsh series of laws upon the Saxons, attempting to force them to convert to Christianity, which he saw as essential for the unity of his empire. The Saxons were pagan, and Charlemagne believed that by converting them to Christianity, he could not only bring them into the fold of the Frankish Empire, but also unite them under a common religious identity. The Saxon Wars, as they came to be known, were marked by periods of intense conflict and bloodshed. Charlemagne's forces had the upper hand in most battles, but the Saxons fought back fiercely, and the war dragged on for decades. The key to Charlemagne's success was his ability to maintain pressure on the Saxons without letting up. He built a series of fortresses along the border, which allowed him to control key strategic locations and keep the Saxons in check. This constant pressure eventually wore down the Saxon resistance, and by 804, the Saxons were finally subdued. With the Saxons now under his control, Charlemagne turned his attention southward, toward the Lombards, a Germanic tribe that had established a kingdom in Italy. The Lombards had long been a threat to the Frankish kingdom. Charlemagne knew that securing Italy was crucial for the stability of his empire. In 774, Charlemagne led a military campaign into Italy, defeating the Lombards and taking control of their kingdom. The defeat of the Lombards not only expanded Charlemagne's empire but also solidified his reputation as a powerful military leader. But Charlemagne's rise to power was not just about military conquest. He was also a shrewd politician, and he knew the importance of alliances. One of his most significant political moves came in 800 when he forged a close relationship with the Pope. At the time, Pope Leo III was under threat from political rivals in Rome, and he turned to Charlemagne for protection. Charlemagne, seeing an opportunity to further cement his power, agreed to protect the Pope. In return, on Christmas Day in 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This event was a turning point in Charlemagne's reign. By accepting the title of Holy Roman Emperor, Charlemagne positioned himself as the protector of Christianity in Europe. He now held the title of Emperor, not just King of the Franks, and his influence spread far beyond the borders of his kingdom. The crowning of Charlemagne as emperor symbolized the revival of the Western Roman Empire. It's a significant milestone in European history. Charlemagne was not just a ruler. He was now the most powerful Christian monarch in Europe, and his empire was seen as a beacon of Christian civilization. Charlemagne's rise to power was a result of his military successes, his political acumen, and his ability to form strategic alliances. By the end of the 8th century, Charlemagne had transformed the Frankish kingdom into the most powerful empire in Europe, laying the foundation for the Holy Roman Empire that would last for centuries. One of the most pivotal moments in Charlemagne's reign came in 800 when he was crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire by Pope Leo III. This event marked not only a personal triumph for Charlemagne, but also a significant turning point in European history. It represented the revival of the Western Roman Empire after its fall nearly 4 centuries earlier. But how did Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, come to wield such influence in the church and across Europe? To understand the significance of this moment, we must first look at Charlemagne's relationship with the Pope and how that alliance shaped the future of Christendom. By the late 8th century, the power of the papacy was under serious threat. Pope Leo III faced opposition in Rome from political rivals, and his position as the leader of the Church was fragile. The Pope needed a strong protector, someone who could help safeguard the interests of the Church and defend the Christian faith. Charlemagne, with his expanding empire and military prowess, seemed like the ideal candidate to offer that protection. Charlemagne, for his part, recognized the importance of the Church as both a religious and political institution. As a devout Christian, he understood that his legitimacy as a ruler was tied not only to his military strength, but also to his connection with the Church. In Charlemagne's mind, the unity of the Frankish people and the stability of his empire were closely linked to the Christian faith. By forging a strong alliance with the Pope, Charlemagne hoped to solidify his rule and extend his influence across Europe. The first significant step in this relationship came when Charlemagne was asked by Pope Hadrian I to intervene in Italy in 773. The Lombards, a Germanic tribe, had been threatening the papacy, and Hadrian sought Charlemagne's help. Charlemagne responded quickly, leading a military campaign into Italy that resulted in the defeat of the Lombards and the strengthening of his political ties with the Church. By doing so, Charlemagne established himself as the protector of the Pope and the Christian Church in Italy, which would pave the way for his eventual coronation as Holy Roman Emperor. However, it was not just military protection that Charlemagne offered. He also worked to ensure that the Pope's influence was strengthened within his own empire. Charlemagne understood that the Church was a powerful force for unity and stability, and he supported the spread of Christianity throughout his empire. Charlemagne personally led efforts to convert the Saxons, a pagan people living in the northern part of his empire, to Christianity. This was part of his larger goal of creating a unified Christian realm, which he believed would benefit both his people and the Church. In 800, Charlemagne was in Rome to celebrate Christmas. On Christmas Day, as he knelt in prayer at St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Leo III took a momentous step. According to tradition, the Pope placed a crown on Charlemagne's head and declared him Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This coronation was not merely a symbolic gesture. It was a political act that linked Charlemagne's authority to the divine right to rule, which the Church had long promoted. By accepting the title of Emperor, Charlemagne was not only becoming the ruler of the Franks, but also the protector and defender of the Christian faith in Europe. This coronation had far-reaching implications. For Charlemagne, it elevated his status to that of a Christian monarch. Placing him at the heart of the religious and political world, he was now the legitimate ruler of a Christian empire, and his influence stretched from Spain in the west to Saxony in the north, and from Italy in the south to the borders of the Danish kingdom in the east. This new title also symbolized the rebirth of the Roman Empire in the west, a symbol of unity for the Christian world. For the Pope, the coronation of Charlemagne was a bold move that strengthened the papacy's influence over Europe. By crowning Charlemagne, Pope Leo III not only secured his own position, but also tied the fate of the papacy to Charlemagne's empire. In exchange for his protection, the Pope had granted Charlemagne divine legitimacy. And this mutual dependency would shape the relationship between the papacy and the Holy Roman Empire for centuries to come. The Pope's coronation of Charlemagne symbolized the idea that political authority and religious authority were intertwined. With the Pope acting as the ultimate spiritual authority and Charlemagne as the protector of the Christian realm, Charlemagne's coronation as Holy Roman Emperor was not without controversy. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople, had its own emperor. The coronation of Charlemagne was seen as a direct challenge to the legitimacy of the Byzantine Empire. Empress Irene of Constantinople, the ruler at the time, was angered by the move and saw it as a threat to her own authority. However, Charlemagne's reign would continue to thrive, and his relationship with the papacy would remain central to his power. The Holy Roman Empire under Charlemagne's leadership would become a cornerstone of European politics for centuries to come. In the years following his coronation, Charlemagne continued to rely on his relationship with the Pope to solidify his power. The Pope served not only as a spiritual advisor, but also as a political ally, offering Charlemagne legitimacy in the eyes of his people and the wider Christian world. This alliance helped Charlemagne maintain control over his vast empire and furthered his vision of a united Christian Europe. Charlemagne's reign was not only marked by military conquests and political alliances, but also by a significant cultural revival known as the Carolingian Renaissance. This period, which spanned from the 8th to the 9th century, saw the revival of learning, the arts, and intellectual life in Western Europe. Under Charlemagne's leadership, the Carolingian Renaissance became a time of flourishing cultural achievements that laid the groundwork for the future of European intellectual and artistic life. Charlemagne himself was deeply interested in the preservation and promotion of learning. He was a man of considerable intellect, even though he was not formally educated in the classical sense. Charlemagne's passion for learning can be seen in the way he surrounded himself with scholars and intellectuals from across his empire. One of his most important actions in this regard was his invitation to Alcuin of York, a leading scholar from England, to come to his court and oversee the educational reforms of his kingdom. Alcuin was a master of the liberal arts, and Charlemagne recognized that the intellectual revival of his empire was essential for the long-term success of his reign. Alcuin played a pivotal role in Charlemagne's efforts to restore learning in the Carolingian Empire. He was appointed as the head of the palace school, which was established at Charlemagne's court in Alcuin. This school became a center of learning, attracting some of the finest scholars from across Europe. Alcuin and his colleagues focused on the study of classical texts, including the works of ancient Roman and Greek philosophers, as well as Christian theology and scripture. The goal was to educate the clergy and the nobility, ensuring that they were well-versed in the intellectual traditions of the past and equipped to lead the people of the empire with wisdom and knowledge. In addition to the palace school, Charlemagne supported the establishment of monasteries as centers of learning. Monks in these monasteries copied ancient manuscripts and texts, preserving the works of classical antiquity that had been lost or forgotten during the Dark Ages. Charlemagne's court encouraged the revival of classical Latin, which had fallen into disuse after the collapse of the Roman Empire. This linguistic revival was important for the unity of Charlemagne's diverse empire, as it allowed for communication and scholarly exchange across regions and cultures. Charlemagne's dedication to learning extended beyond education and intellectual life. He also took steps to standardize and reform religious practices within his empire. He sought to ensure that Christian doctrine was taught uniformly, and he worked to align the practices of the Church with the teachings of Rome. This was a key part of Charlemagne's vision for a unified Christian empire, and it helped to strengthen the power of the Church across Europe. One of Charlemagne's most lasting contributions to the Carolingian Renaissance was his emphasis on the creation of manuscripts and the preservation of knowledge. Under his rule, the production of illuminated manuscripts reached new heights. These manuscripts were painstakingly created by monks in scriptoriums, and they often featured beautiful illustrations, intricate borders, and decorative lettering. The illuminated manuscripts produced during this period were not only works of religious significance, but also pieces of art that demonstrated the wealth and cultural sophistication of Charlemagne's empire. Charlemagne also understood the importance of preserving and expanding knowledge for future generations. He encouraged the creation of libraries and the collection of books, making learning more accessible to his subjects. This intellectual renaissance was not limited to the clergy and nobility. Charlemagne also promoted education for the general public. While literacy rates remained low throughout much of the empire, the Carolingian Renaissance provided a foundation for future educational reforms that would shape the development of European education for centuries to come. In addition to the intellectual and religious reforms, Charlemagne also made significant contributions to the development of art and architecture. The architecture of the Carolingian period reflected the emperor's vision of grandeur and power. Charlemagne's palace at Aachen, where he established his court school, was a symbol of his imperial authority. The Palatine Chapel, built by Charlemagne, became a model for future European churches and is considered one of the most important architectural achievements of the period. Charlemagne's patronage of the arts was not limited to architecture. He also encouraged the creation of religious and secular artworks. Artists and craftsmen in his empire created intricate metalwork, sculptures, and jewelry, often using Christian themes and symbols. These works of art were not only decorative, but also served as expressions of religious devotion and imperial power. The Carolingian Renaissance, while lasting only a few decades, was a crucial period in the history of Western Europe. It was a time when learning, culture, and the arts flourished, thanks to Charlemagne's patronage and vision. The Renaissance helped to lay the foundations for the later intellectual movements of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance itself. Charlemagne's emphasis on education, the preservation of classical knowledge, and the promotion of the arts ensured that his empire would leave a lasting legacy for future generations. As Charlemagne's empire grew, so did his commitment to education and cultural revival. The intellectual and artistic achievements of the Carolingian Renaissance would continue to influence the development of European culture for centuries to come. While Charlemagne's empire eventually fragmented after his death, the cultural and intellectual foundations he established would be carried forward by subsequent generations, ensuring that the legacy of the Carolingian Renaissance would endure in the centuries that followed. One of Charlemagne's most significant and lengthy military campaigns was his war against the Saxons, a Germanic tribe living to the north of his empire. The Saxons were fiercely independent and had long resisted Frankish rule, making them a major threat to Charlemagne's vision of a unified Christian empire. For nearly 30 years, Charlemagne waged war on the Saxons, seeking to conquer them and convert them to Christianity. The struggle between Charlemagne and the Saxons was not just a battle for land, it was also a clash of cultures and religions. With Charlemagne determined to impose Christianity on the pagan Saxons, the Saxons had always been a thorn in the side of the Frankish rulers. Even before Charlemagne's reign, the Franks had tried, unsuccessfully, to subdue the Saxons. The region was marked by constant rebellion and resistance, as the Saxons valued their autonomy and pagan traditions. They had lived in the forests of northern Germany for centuries and were wary of outside influences. They resisted both the military might of the Franks and the missionary work of Christian missionaries, who had been trying to convert them for years. When Charlemagne ascended to the throne in 771, he inherited the long-standing conflict with the Saxons. Charlemagne was a staunch Christian, and he believed that it was his divine duty to spread Christianity across Europe. The Saxons, who still practiced their ancient pagan beliefs, became the primary target of his religious and military campaigns. Charlemagne saw the conquest of the Saxons as not only a military necessity, but also a religious obligation. Charlemagne's first major campaign against the Saxons took place in 772. The Saxons had attacked a Christian mission in the region, and Charlemagne responded by marching into Saxony to punish them. His army attacked their strongholds, burned villages, and defeated the Saxon forces in a series of battles. The most notable of these early victories was the capture of the Saxon city of Eresburg, which contained a sacred pagan shrine dedicated to the god Irminsul. Charlemagne ordered the destruction of the shrine, symbolizing the Frankish Empire's attempt to eradicate paganism and establish Christianity as the dominant religion. Despite these early successes, the Saxons continued to resist. Charlemagne's campaign quickly turned into a protracted war, with the Saxons fighting back in every way they could. They would retreat into their forests and launch guerrilla-style attacks on Charlemagne's forces, making it difficult for him to secure lasting control of the region. For every battle Charlemagne won, the Saxons would regroup and continue their resistance. The campaign became a bitter and bloody struggle, with no clear end in sight. The turning point in the Saxon Wars came in 780, when Charlemagne began a series of reforms aimed at consolidating his control over the region. He established a system of local governance in Saxony, sending royal agents known as missi dominici to oversee the administration of justice and enforce Charlemagne's rule. He also began to build a network of fortresses and military strongholds along the borders of Saxony to defend against further Saxon uprisings. Charlemagne also recognized the importance of converting the Saxons to Christianity if his rule was to be fully accepted. He sent missionaries into Saxony to preach the Christian faith, and in 785, he ordered that all Saxons be baptized. The forced conversion of the Saxons was met with resistance, and many Saxons refused to abandon their pagan beliefs. Charlemagne responded by intensifying his military campaign, and the forced conversion efforts grew more brutal. In 782, Charlemagne issued the infamous Verdun Decree, which ordered the execution of 4,500 Saxon rebels, who had refused to convert. The massacre, known as the Massacre of Verdun, remains one of the most controversial events of Charlemagne's reign. It marked a turning point in his campaign against the Saxons. He demonstrated his willingness to use extreme measures to suppress resistance. Despite the violence and bloodshed, Charlemagne eventually succeeded in subduing the Saxons. By 804, after nearly 30 years of warfare, the Saxons were finally incorporated into the Frankish Empire. Charlemagne's brutal tactics had broken their resistance, and the region was now firmly under his control. The Saxons were baptized en masse, and their pagan practices were suppressed. Charlemagne's empire was now a unified Christian realm, and the Saxons, once fierce opponents, had been absorbed into the fabric of the Carolingian Empire. The Saxon Wars, while brutal, were a crucial part of Charlemagne's efforts to expand his empire and solidify his Christian vision for Europe. The conquest of the Saxons gave Charlemagne control over one of the last remaining independent regions in Western Europe. It also allowed him to strengthen the position of the Christian Church in his empire. As the conversion of the Saxons furthered Charlemagne's goal of creating a united Christian empire, the wars also had a lasting impact on the history of Europe. The integration of the Saxons into the Frankish Empire helped to shape the political and cultural landscape of medieval Europe. It also set the stage for the eventual formation of the Holy Roman Empire, which would play a central role in European history for centuries to come. While Charlemagne's victory over the Saxons was a military and religious triumph, it was also a reminder of the harsh realities of empire building. Charlemagne's methods were often ruthless, and his campaigns were marked by bloodshed and forced conversions. Yet for Charlemagne, the end justified the means. His reign transformed the Frankish Empire into one of the most powerful and enduring empires in European history. And the Saxon Wars were a key chapter in that transformation. Charlemagne's empire, despite its fragmentation after his death, left a profound legacy that would shape the course of European history for centuries. His reign, marked by military conquest, religious reform, and intellectual revival, paved the way for the formation of the Holy Roman Empire and influenced the political, cultural, and religious landscape of Europe. Charlemagne's legacy is not just a reflection of his personal achievements, but also a symbol of the continuity and evolution of European civilization. One of Charlemagne's most enduring legacies is the creation of the Holy Roman Empire. Although the title of Holy Roman Emperor had existed in various forms, Charlemagne's coronation in 800 by Pope Leo III as the Emperor of the Romans revived the idea of a Christian Roman Empire in the West. Charlemagne was not merely a monarch of the Franks. By becoming emperor, positioned himself as the protector of Christianity and the rightful ruler of a unified Christian Europe. This event symbolized the fusion of the religious and secular realms and marked the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire, which would last in various forms until 1806. The Holy Roman Empire, however, was not a direct continuation of the ancient Roman Empire, but rather a new political entity that sought to revive the idea of Roman unity under Christian rule. Charlemagne's empire served as the foundation for the later medieval empire, which included territories in present-day Germany, Italy, and beyond. While Charlemagne's empire did not endure in its original form, it was an essential precursor to the Holy Roman Empire, and his vision of a Christian empire would influence European rulers for centuries. Charlemagne's reign also set a precedent for the role of the monarch as the defender of the Christian faith. His relationship with the Pope, which was crucial to his legitimacy, established the idea that kings and emperors were divinely appointed to protect and uphold the Christian Church. This notion of the divine right of kings would become a central theme in European monarchies for the next 1,000 years. Charlemagne's alliance with the Pope would also have lasting consequences for the relationship between the Church and secular rulers, setting the stage for future conflicts and power struggles, particularly during the investiture controversy of the 11th century. While Charlemagne's empire ultimately fragmented after his death, his vision of a unified Christian Europe persisted. His empire was divided among his 3 grandsons in the Treaty of Verdun in 843. But the cultural and religious foundations he laid continued to influence European rulers. The division of Charlemagne's empire created the conditions for the rise of new political entities, including the Kingdom of France and the Holy Roman Empire, both of which would play central roles in European history for the next several centuries. One of the key aspects of Charlemagne's legacy was his role in the Carolingian Renaissance. This intellectual revival, which saw a renewed interest in classical learning, laid the groundwork for the later European Renaissance. Charlemagne's emphasis on education, literacy, and the preservation of knowledge helped to revive learning in a time when much of the classical knowledge of antiquity had been lost. The schools he established and the manuscripts produced during his reign played a crucial role in preserving the intellectual heritage of the Roman Empire and helped to shape the future of Western thought. Charlemagne's commitment to the Church and his promotion of Christianity also had long-lasting effects on European culture and religion. His efforts to convert the Saxons and other pagan peoples to Christianity ensured that the religion would become the dominant force in Europe for the next millennium. Charlemagne's empire, with its emphasis on Christian unity, set the stage for the dominance of Christianity in Western Europe, and the Church would remain a powerful political and social institution throughout the medieval period. Despite the challenges his empire faced after his death, Charlemagne's reign marked a turning point in European history. His legacy is reflected not only in the political entities that arose from his empire, but also in the cultural, religious, and intellectual transformations that occurred during his reign. The Carolingian Renaissance, the consolidation of Christianity across Europe, and the revival of the idea of a Christian Roman Empire all point to Charlemagne's pivotal role in shaping the medieval world. Charlemagne's influence also extended beyond Europe. His empire was one of the first to establish lasting diplomatic relations with the Byzantine Empire and the Abbasid Caliphate. Charlemagne sought to secure his empire's position on the world stage and establish it as a legitimate power in the eyes of other great empires of the time. These diplomatic ties helped to promote trade, cultural exchange, and the spread of ideas between East and West. In the centuries following Charlemagne's death, his legacy continued to be celebrated and revered. His reign was idealized by later European monarchs who sought to emulate his success and to claim the mantle of the Holy Roman Empire. His empire became a model for later rulers who looked to Charlemagne's efforts to unite Christendom and establish a powerful Christian kingdom as an example of how to govern a diverse and sprawling empire, even today. Charlemagne is remembered as one of the most influential rulers in European history. His contributions to the cultural, religious, and political development of Europe have left an indelible mark on the continent. From the creation of the Holy Roman Empire to the promotion of Christianity, Charlemagne's reign shaped the trajectory of Western civilization for centuries to come. His legacy continues to be celebrated in both Europe and beyond. It's a symbol of leadership, unity, and the enduring power of the Christian faith. Charlemagne's family played a crucial role in both his personal life and the legacy of his empire. As a ruler, he was acutely aware of the importance of succession and the need to secure his empire for future generations. Despite his many military triumphs and political successes, Charlemagne's family life was complex and often troubled, marked by multiple marriages, conflicts over succession, and the eventual division of his vast empire among his heirs. Charlemagne had multiple wives and concubines throughout his life, and his family was a large and varied one. His first marriage was to Himiltrude, although it was not particularly well documented, and it was likely an early arrangement that ended in divorce. His second marriage to Hildegard of Windsor, whom he married in 771, proved to be more significant. Hildegard bore him several children, including his future successor, Louis the Pious, and 3 other sons, Charles, Pepin, and Louis. Hildegard's death in 783 left Charlemagne widowed, and he later married Fastrada, a noblewoman from Franconia. Their marriage produced 2 daughters, but was marked by significant political tensions. Charlemagne's relationship with Fastrada was often strained, especially as she became an increasingly powerful influence at court. Charlemagne's final marriage was to Liutgard of the Saxons, a union that was both politically strategic and personal. As Charlemagne had long been involved in the Saxon Wars, despite the multiple marriages, Charlemagne's relationship with his children would prove to be one of the most challenging aspects of his reign. Charlemagne was deeply invested in securing the future of his empire through his heirs. His son Louis the Pious was designated as Charlemagne's successor, but there was no clear plan for how the empire would be divided among Charlemagne's other sons. This uncertainty over succession became a source of tension within the Carolingian family, and would contribute to the eventual fragmentation of the empire after Charlemagne's death. Charlemagne's approach to succession was rooted in the custom of dividing the empire among his heirs, a practice that was common among medieval rulers. Charlemagne, like his predecessors, divided his vast territories into separate kingdoms for each of his sons. His eldest son, Charles the Younger, received the western portion of the Frankish kingdom, while his second son, Pepin, was given Italy. Louis the Pious, Charlemagne's most trusted son, was granted the eastern portion of the empire, which would later become the basis for the Holy Roman Empire. However, the division of Charlemagne's empire among his sons created internal conflicts and rivalries that weakened the unity of the empire after Charlemagne's death. Charlemagne's succession plans were further complicated by the fact that Louis the Pious, whom Charlemagne had groomed for leadership, was not an effective ruler. Although Louis had been given the title of co-emperor by Charlemagne before his death, his reign was fraught with difficulties. Louis faced opposition from his brothers and their supporters, as well as rebellion within the empire. His inability to unite the empire under his leadership ultimately led to the division of the kingdom once more. In 843, after Louis's death, the empire was formally divided among Charlemagne's three grandsons in the Treaty of Verdun. This division laid the groundwork for the creation of the modern European states of France, Germany, and Italy. But it also marked the beginning of the decline of the Carolingian Empire. The problems surrounding succession and family rivalry were not unique to Charlemagne's reign. They were a common theme in medieval Europe, where dynastic struggles and internal conflict often undermine the stability of empires. Charlemagne's efforts to secure his empire for his sons and grandsons, while well-intentioned, ultimately contributed to its fragmentation. The division of the empire among Charlemagne's descendants weakened the central authority of the empire and set the stage for centuries of political instability in Europe. Despite the challenges in his family life, Charlemagne's reign and his empire left a lasting legacy. His efforts to secure the future of his empire, though ultimately unsuccessful in terms of maintaining unity, set the stage for the political evolution of medieval Europe. Charlemagne's family struggles and the division of his empire highlighted the complexities of dynastic succession and the challenges faced by rulers in securing their legacies. While his sons and grandsons were unable to maintain the empire Charlemagne had built, his reign remains one of the most significant in European history, and his family played a central role in the formation of the medieval European states. Charlemagne's legacy, both as a ruler and as a father, is a testament to his vision of a unified Christian Europe. His efforts to build an empire, ensure its survival, and secure it for his descendants shaped the future of the continent. Although the Carolingian Empire ultimately fragmented after his death, Charlemagne's influence on European history remained profound. His family's role in the empire's history, from its rise to its decline, serves as a reminder of the complexities of power and succession in medieval Europe. Charlemagne's reign may have ended in division, but his vision of a united Christian empire laid the foundation for the Holy Roman Empire and the political structure of Europe for centuries to come. One of Charlemagne's most enduring legacies is his role in spreading Christianity across his vast empire. As a devout Christian, Charlemagne saw himself not only as a ruler, but also as the protector and promoter of the Christian faith. His efforts to convert the pagan peoples of Europe, particularly the Saxons, are central to his reign and his vision of a united Christian empire. Charlemagne's religious policies were deeply intertwined with his political and military objectives. His promotion of Christianity helped to shape the future of Western Europe. Charlemagne became king. His kingdom was already predominantly Christian, but much of Europe, particularly the northern and eastern parts of the continent, remained either pagan or practiced forms of Christianity that differed from the Roman tradition. Charlemagne, who had inherited the task of uniting and strengthening the Frankish kingdom, saw the spread of Christianity as essential for both the cohesion of his empire and his personal legitimacy as a ruler. He believed that the Christian faith would unite his people and provide a moral foundation for his rule. Charlemagne's most significant religious campaign was his conquest of the Saxons, a pagan people who lived in what is now northern Germany. The Saxons had long resisted attempts by the Frankish rulers to convert them to Christianity. The Saxon Wars, which lasted for nearly 3 decades, were not only military campaigns, but also efforts to impose Christianity on a people who had their own deeply rooted pagan beliefs. Charlemagne's victory over the Saxons was both a military and religious triumph, as he forcibly converted them to Christianity. the forced conversion of the Saxons was one of the most controversial aspects of Charlemagne's reign. Charlemagne's methods were often brutal. Those who resisted baptism were punished, and in some cases, entire villages were destroyed. In 782, after the Saxons rebelled against the forced conversions, Charlemagne ordered the execution of 4,500 Saxon rebels at the massacre of Verdun.
This bloody event marked a turning point in the Saxon Wars and underscored Charlemagne's determination to impose Christianity on his conquered subjects.
Despite the violence, the conversion of the Saxons helped to solidify Charlemagne's rule over the northern part of his empire and ensured that Christianity became the dominant religion across his territories. Charlemagne's religious policies were not limited to military conquest. He also worked to strengthen the church's authority within his empire. Charlemagne's relationship with the Pope was a key part of his strategy to promote Christianity. In exchange for Charlemagne's protection, Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 800, further legitimizing his reign. This act symbolized the close alliance between the Frankish monarchy and the papacy, and it solidified Charlemagne's role as the protector of Christianity in the West. Charlemagne's support for the papacy allowed him to gain political and religious legitimacy, and his reign marked the beginning of a period in which the Pope and the Emperor would work together to shape the course of European history. Charlemagne also promoted Christianity through the establishment of churches, monasteries, and schools throughout his empire. He understood the importance of education and literacy in spreading the Christian faith, and he established a network of schools where clergy could be educated in Christian theology and scripture. These schools played a key role in the intellectual revival of the Carolingian Renaissance, as they helped to preserve Christian texts and classical works of learning. Monasteries, too, became centers of learning and religious activity, with monks copying manuscripts and spreading Christian teachings throughout the empire. In addition to spreading Christianity within his empire, Charlemagne also sought to unify the Christian faith across Europe. One of his key goals was to bring religious practices in his empire into line with those of Rome. He worked closely with the Pope to ensure that the liturgy, religious practices, and ecclesiastical administration in his kingdom were consistent with the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. This effort to standardize Christian practices helped to create a sense of unity within his empire and set the stage for the religious unity of medieval Europe. Charlemagne's efforts to spread Christianity also extended beyond the borders of his empire. He sought to establish diplomatic and religious ties with other Christian kingdoms, including the Byzantine Empire and the Anglo-Saxon Kingdom of Wessex. These alliances helped to promote the idea of a united Christian Europe and strengthened Charlemagne's position as the leader of the Christian world. Through his diplomacy, Charlemagne ensured that his empire remained at the center of the Christian world and that the Christian faith would continue to spread throughout Europe. While Charlemagne's military campaigns and religious policies were often harsh, they had a profound and lasting impact on the spread of Christianity in Europe. By the time of his death in 814, Charlemagne had succeeded in uniting much of Western Europe under the banner of Christianity. His empire became a model for later Christian rulers, and his efforts to promote the Christian faith helped to shape the religious and cultural landscape of Europe for centuries to come. Charlemagne's role in the spread of Christianity is also reflected in the legacy of the Holy Roman Empire. After Charlemagne's death, his empire was divided among his heirs. But the idea of a Christian empire that would unite Europe under the rule of a Christian monarch persisted. The Holy Roman Empire, which Charlemagne had established, continued to play a central role in European politics and religion for centuries. Charlemagne's vision of a united Christian Europe would continue to influence rulers and popes throughout the Middle Ages and beyond. In conclusion, Charlemagne's promotion of Christianity was one of the defining aspects of his reign. His military conquests, religious policies, and close relationship with the Pope helped to establish Christianity as the dominant faith in Europe. Charlemagne's efforts to spread Christianity were not without controversy, but they laid the foundation for the Christianization of Europe and the eventual rise of the Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne's legacy as a protector of Christianity remains one of his most significant contributions to the history of Western civilization. Charlemagne's success as a ruler was not only due to his political acumen, but also to his exceptional military leadership. He was a formidable strategist and tactician, able to lead his armies to victory in numerous battles. Charlemagne's military campaigns, particularly his wars against the Saxons, Lombards, and Avars, played a crucial role in the expansion of his empire. His ability to adapt to different battlefield conditions, manage large armies, and maintain logistical support was a testament to his military genius. Charlemagne's approach to warfare not only secured his empire's borders but also laid the foundation for the Carolingian Renaissance by ensuring the stability and unity of his rule. One of Charlemagne's key military strengths was his ability to lead from the front. He was often present on the battlefield with his soldiers, demonstrating both courage and leadership. His personal involvement in military campaigns inspired loyalty among his troops and helped to solidify his reputation as a warrior king. Charlemagne's presence on the battlefield was a symbol of his commitment to the success of his empire, and his soldiers respected him for his direct involvement in the campaigns. Charlemagne's military prowess was especially evident during his long-running conflict with the Saxons, a group of pagan Germanic tribes to the north of his empire. The Saxons had long resisted Frankish rule, and Charlemagne recognized that securing their territory was crucial for the stability of his empire. The Saxon Wars, which lasted for over 30 years, were marked by fierce battles, guerrilla tactics, and long periods of resistance from the Saxons. Charlemagne's military campaigns were relentless, and he employed a combination of large-scale battles and smaller skirmishes to wear down the Saxon resistance. One of Charlemagne's key strategies during the Saxon Wars was the use of fortified positions. He established a network of strongholds and fortresses along the border with Saxony to protect his empire and maintain a constant military presence in the region. These fortifications allowed Charlemagne to control key routes and prevent the Saxons from launching raids into Frankish territory. Charlemagne's use of these fortified positions was a key element in his success, as they allowed him to maintain pressure on the Saxons while also providing a base of operations for his armies. Charlemagne's military campaigns were also marked by his ability to adapt to different combat situations. Whether engaging in large-scale battles or facing smaller, more mobile forces, Charlemagne's forces were able to adjust their tactics to suit the conditions. In battles against the Saxons, Charlemagne's forces would often engage in direct confrontations, using heavy cavalry and infantry to crush the enemy. However, in regions like the mountainous terrain of the Lombards or the Avars in the east, Charlemagne's forces adapted their tactics to make use of the landscape, often relying on lighter, more mobile troops to outmaneuver the enemy. Charlemagne's military success was also due to his ability to maintain a well-supplied and organized army. The logistics of warfare during the 8th and 9th centuries were complex, and Charlemagne's empire was vast. Maintaining supply lines, ensuring that troops had enough food and equipment, and keeping the army properly trained were essential to the success of his campaigns. Charlemagne understood the importance of maintaining a well-equipped military, and he ensured that his soldiers were well supplied and ready for battle. His military campaigns were supported by a strong administrative structure, which allowed him to raise troops quickly and efficiently and ensure that the army had the resources it needed to succeed. Charlemagne's leadership extended beyond the battlefield. He was also skilled at managing the political and social aspects of his military campaigns. His military victories were often followed by diplomatic efforts to incorporate the defeated peoples into his empire. Charlemagne understood that military conquest alone was not enough to maintain long-term control of an empire. He sought to integrate conquered peoples by offering them protection, establishing local governance, and, in many cases, encouraging them to convert to Christianity. The Saxons, for example, were not only militarily defeated but also forced to adopt Christianity as part of their integration into Charlemagne's empire. Charlemagne's military campaigns were also important for their cultural and economic impact. The conquest of new territories brought new resources, new territories for settlement, and new people into the empire. This helped to increase the wealth and power of the Carolingian Empire. Charlemagne's military victories also facilitated trade and cultural exchange. As conquered regions were integrated into the wider Carolingian economy, the movement of goods, people, and ideas across Charlemagne's empire played a key role in the Carolingian Renaissance. As intellectuals, artists, and merchants moved freely throughout the empire, contributing to the cultural and economic revival that Charlemagne championed. Despite Charlemagne's military successes, his empire faced challenges in the years after his death. The empire was divided among his sons, and internal strife weakened the unity of the realm. Charlemagne's descendants were unable to maintain the empire's military strength, and the empire eventually fragmented into separate kingdoms. However, Charlemagne's military innovations and strategies continued to influence later European rulers. His ability to lead large-scale campaigns, maintain logistical support, and adapt to different battlefield conditions set a standard for medieval warfare. The military legacy of Charlemagne's reign would continue to shape European warfare and military organization for centuries. In conclusion, Charlemagne's military strategy and leadership were key to the expansion and success of his empire. His personal involvement in military campaigns, his ability to adapt to different combat situations, and his focus on maintaining a well-supplied and organized army were all crucial to his military success. Charlemagne's military campaigns not only secured his empire as borders, but also laid the foundation for the Carolingian Renaissance, promoting cultural and economic exchange across Europe. His military legacy, though challenged by internal divisions after his death, remains one of the most significant aspects of his reign. The Carolingian Renaissance, which flourished under Charlemagne's reign, is one of the most significant intellectual and cultural revivals of the early Middle Ages. Charlemagne, with his deep commitment to the preservation and advancement of knowledge, played a pivotal role in bringing about this period of intellectual revival. The Carolingian Renaissance was not only a revival of classical learning, but also a cultural transformation that set the stage for the future development of Europe. Through his support for education, the arts, and scholarship, Charlemagne helped preserve the intellectual heritage of the ancient world and ensure that it would be passed down to future generations. At the heart of Charlemagne's efforts to foster a cultural renaissance was his belief in the power of education. Charlemagne recognized that the survival of his empire and the unity of his diverse and often disparate people depended on shared knowledge, a common language, and a unified Christian faith. One of his most important contributions to this goal was the establishment of a palace school at his court in Aachen. Charlemagne invited prominent scholars from across Europe to teach at the school, including the renowned English scholar Alcuin of York. Alcuin became one of Charlemagne's most trusted advisors and the head of the palace school, where he oversaw the education of the royal family and the young nobility of the empire. Alcuin's influence on Charlemagne's educational reforms was profound. Under Alcuin's guidance, the palace school became a center of learning, focusing on the study of the liberal arts, grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, as well as Christian theology. The goal was to create an educated elite capable of serving in Charlemagne's administration and the church. Alcuin's curriculum, which was based on classical, Roman, and Christian texts, helped revive the study of ancient works that had been lost or neglected during the earlier centuries of the Dark Ages. The intellectual revival that took place at the palace school contributed to the broader cultural renaissance that characterized Charlemagne's reign. Charlemagne's commitment to education was not limited to his court. He also supported the establishment of schools throughout his empire, particularly in monasteries and cathedrals. Monasteries, which had long been centers of religious life, became important centers of learning and scholarship during the Carolingian Renaissance. Monks in these monasteries were responsible for copying and preserving ancient manuscripts, including works of classical literature, philosophy, and theology. These manuscripts, many of which were written in Latin, served as the foundation for much of the intellectual activity of the period. Charlemagne also promoted the use of the Carolingian minuscule script, a new and legible form of writing that allowed for the easier reproduction of texts and helped preserve classical works for future generations. In addition to education, Charlemagne's reign was marked by a flourishing of the arts, particularly in the fields of architecture and illuminated manuscript production. Charlemagne understood the importance of art and architecture in promoting his vision of a united Christian empire. One of the most iconic architectural achievements of his reign was the Palatine Chapel in Aachen, which he commissioned as part of his royal palace. The chapel, which combined Roman, Byzantine, and Christian architectural styles, became a symbol of Charlemagne's power and the unity of his empire. Its design was intended to reflect both the grandeur of the ancient Roman Empire and the Christian ideals that Charlemagne sought to promote. The production of illuminated manuscripts also flourished during the Carolingian Renaissance. These manuscripts, which were often religious texts, were painstakingly copied and decorated by monks in monasteries and scriptoriums. The illumination of manuscripts was not only a form of artistic expression, but also a way of preserving and transmitting knowledge. These illuminated texts, with their intricate designs and vibrant colors, became some of the most prized cultural artifacts of the Carolingian period. They reflect the intellectual and artistic achievements of Charlemagne's empire and the dedication of his scholars and artists to preserving the cultural heritage of the ancient world. Charlemagne's support for the arts and learning also had a broader cultural impact. The intellectual revival of the Carolingian Renaissance contributed to the development of a shared cultural identity across Charlemagne's vast empire. The spread of education, the promotion of the arts, and the preservation of classical knowledge helped to create a sense of unity among the diverse peoples within the empire. Charlemagne's efforts to standardize religious practices, promote Christianity, and support the development of a common intellectual tradition played a key role in forging a cohesive Christian European identity. The Carolingian Renaissance, however, was not without its challenges. Despite Charlemagne's efforts to promote education and scholarship, literacy rates remained low for much of his reign, particularly among the peasantry. Moreover, the Carolingian Renaissance was largely confined to the elite classes, and its intellectual and cultural achievements did not always reach the broader population. Nevertheless, the period set the stage for the subsequent intellectual developments of the Middle Ages and laid the groundwork for the later European Renaissance, which would occur centuries after Charlemagne's death. In conclusion, the Carolingian Renaissance was a period of intellectual, cultural, and artistic revival that was deeply influenced by Charlemagne's leadership. Through his support for education, the arts, and the preservation of knowledge, Charlemagne helped to restore classical learning and foster a cultural transformation in Europe. The legacy of the Carolingian Renaissance can be seen in the intellectual and cultural achievements of the Middle Ages, as well as in the preservation of classical texts that continue to shape Western thought today. Charlemagne's reign, with its emphasis on education, the arts, and religious reform, was a turning point in European history and laid the foundation for the development of European civilization in the centuries to come. Charlemagne's reign was not only a time of military conquest and religious expansion, but also a period of significant legal reforms. As the ruler of a vast and diverse empire, Charlemagne recognized the importance of establishing a unified system of laws to govern his subjects. His legal reforms helped to standardize governance across his empire, ensuring greater order and justice. Charlemagne's legal policies were influenced by his Christian beliefs. His desire to create stability within his empire, and his goal of consolidating his power over the territories he had conquered. One of Charlemagne's most significant legal contributions was the creation of the capitularies, a series of royal decrees or legal codes that governed various aspects of daily life in his empire. These laws were issued to address everything from religious practice and land ownership to criminal justice and the duties of local officials. The capitularies served as a crucial tool for governing his vast empire and ensuring that the laws were applied uniformly across different regions. The capitularies were divided into different categories, including capitularies for the church, which dealt with religious matters and ecclesiastical law, capitularies for the nobility, which focused on the obligations of the aristocracy, and capitularies for the common people, which addressed issues affecting the general population. These legal codes were designed to regulate every aspect of life in Charlemagne's empire, ensuring that the realm was governed by a clear and consistent set of rules. Charlemagne's legal reforms were also shaped by his deep commitment to Christianity. He believed that Christian law should govern both the church and the state, and he worked closely with the clergy to ensure that the capitularies were in line with Christian doctrine. Charlemagne saw himself as the protector of the church and its teachings, and he believed that the laws of his empire should reflect Christian values. In this way, the capitularies were not just legal codes, but also moral and religious guidelines, reinforcing Charlemagne's vision of a Christian empire. One of the key elements of Charlemagne's legal reforms was the role of local officials. To ensure that the capitularies were enforced effectively, Charlemagne appointed missi, dominic royal envoys who were sent throughout the empire to oversee the administration of justice and ensure that the local rulers were carrying out their duties properly. These officials were tasked with monitoring the actions of the nobility and ensuring that the laws were upheld in both the cities and the countryside. The Missi Dominici were instrumental in centralizing Charlemagne's power and making sure that the capitularies were being enforced in every corner of the empire. Charlemagne's legal reforms also focused on the improvement of the judicial system. He established a system of royal courts to hear disputes and dispense justice. The king, as the supreme judge, is responsible for overseeing the most important legal matters, while lower courts handled more localized cases. Charlemagne was particularly interested in ensuring that the judicial system was fair and accessible to all. He issued a number of decrees aimed at ensuring that justice was not just a privilege of the rich and powerful, but was available to all people, regardless of their social status. Charlemagne also worked to eliminate corruption within the judicial system, ensuring that judges were impartial and that their decisions were based on law rather than personal gain. In addition to criminal law, Charlemagne was also concerned with the regulation of trade and commerce. He implemented laws that aimed to ensure fair trade practices and prevent fraud. These laws were designed to protect merchants and ensure that goods were traded in a just and equitable manner. Charlemagne recognized that a strong economy was essential for the stability of his empire, and he sought to create a legal framework that would encourage economic growth while maintaining fairness in the marketplace. One of Charlemagne's most lasting contributions to legal history was his attempt to standardize weights and measures across his empire. He issued decrees that established uniform units of measurement for everything from land to grain. This standardization helped to facilitate trade and communication across the empire, as merchants and traders could rely on consistent measurements and weights. Charlemagne's efforts to standardize the legal system also extended to the coinage used throughout his empire. He worked to ensure that the currency was consistent, which further aided trade and commerce. Charlemagne's legal reforms also reflected his concern for the welfare of his subjects. He implemented laws that sought to protect the vulnerable, including the poor, women, and children. He recognized that the stability of his empire depended on the well-being of its people, and his laws were often aimed at ensuring that everyone, regardless of their social standing, was treated fairly. Charlemagne was particularly concerned with protecting the rights of the church, and many of his legal reforms were designed to safeguard ecclesiastical lands, clergy, and church property. The capitularies and Charlemagne's legal reforms were a significant step forward in the development of European law. Charlemagne's efforts to standardize legal practices, protect his subjects, promote justice, laid the groundwork for future legal systems in Europe. His commitment to creating a unified legal framework helped to stabilize his empire and ensure its long-term survival. The influence of Charlemagne's legal reforms can be seen in the development of medieval European legal systems, as many of the principles established during his reign were carried forward into the Middle Ages. In conclusion, Charlemagne's legal reforms were a key part of his efforts to govern and unify his vast empire. The capitularies were a significant achievement, providing a clear set of laws that governed all aspects of life within the empire. Charlemagne's legal policies were shaped by his Christian beliefs and his desire to ensure justice and fairness for all his subjects. His efforts to standardize the judicial system, regulate trade, and protect the vulnerable helped to create a more stable and cohesive empire. Charlemagne's legal legacy would go on to influence the development of European law and governance for centuries to come. Charlemagne's reign not only transformed his own empire, but also laid the foundations for the governance systems of medieval Europe. His innovative approach to administration, governance, and centralization of power served as a model for future European rulers. While his empire would ultimately fragment after his death, Charlemagne's influence on European governance would continue to resonate for centuries. His legacy in shaping the administrative and political structures of Europe cannot be overstated, as he helped establish many of the principles that would guide European kings and emperors for generations. One of Charlemagne's most significant contributions to European governance was his approach to centralization. In a time when much of Europe was divided into smaller, often warring kingdoms, Charlemagne sought to create a unified state under his control. To do so, he implemented a system of governance that was both highly organized and adaptable. Central to his approach was the concept of a strong monarchy with the authority to enforce laws and maintain order. Yet he also allowed for local governance through a network of officials. Charlemagne's empire was divided into administrative units called counties, each of which was governed by a count. The counts were responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and enforcing Charlemagne's decrees. However, to ensure that the counts were doing their jobs properly and were not becoming too powerful or corrupt, Charlemagne instituted a system of oversight. He sent royal envoys known as missi dominici to visit the counties, ensuring that the counts were following the emperor's orders and that justice was being fairly administered. This system of royal oversight helped maintain a balance between central authority and local control, and ensured that Charlemagne's laws were implemented consistently throughout the empire. This system of governance would influence future European rulers, would also look to Charlemagne's centralized model as a template for managing their own realms. The idea of royal oversight, the use of appointed officials, and the balance between central and local authority would become common practices in medieval European kingdoms. Charlemagne's methods were innovative for his time and helped to create a more unified and cohesive state. Charlemagne's administration also sought to improve the efficiency of government by promoting education and literacy. He understood that a well-educated bureaucracy was essential for the proper functioning of his empire. To this end, Charlemagne supported the Carolingian Renaissance, an intellectual revival that emphasized the importance of learning, scholarship, and the preservation of knowledge. His establishment of schools and monasteries that taught reading, writing, and Christian doctrine helped to ensure that the clergy and other administrative officials were well trained. Charlemagne's patronage of scholars, such as Alcuin of York, not only revived classical learning, but also provided the empire with a competent and educated class of administrators who were capable of managing the vast empire Charlemagne had built. This emphasis on education and literacy would have long-lasting effects on European governance. The trained officials and clerks who emerged from Charlemagne's educational system helped to preserve and transmit knowledge. Throughout the Middle Ages, they also played an important role in maintaining the functioning of royal courts, managing estates, and handling diplomatic affairs. In many ways, Charlemagne's investment in education ensured that his system of governance would endure even after his death. Charlemagne also made important strides in standardizing laws and systems of justice within his empire. As previously discussed, his capitularies provided a clear set of legal frameworks for his subjects. His legal reforms included laws governing everything from taxation and land ownership to religious practices and crime. Charlemagne believed that laws were essential for maintaining order and preventing chaos, and he worked to ensure that laws were applied uniformly across his empire. The legal principles established during his reign would go on to influence the development of medieval European legal systems, which would be based on similar concepts of centralized authority, uniform legal codes, and the role of the monarchy in enforcing the law. Charlemagne's administrative policies also set a precedent for the integration of the Christian Church into governance. Charlemagne viewed the Church as a vital partner in the governance of his empire. By forging a close relationship with the Pope and supporting the spread of Christianity, Charlemagne created a unique model of church-state cooperation. This cooperation helped to stabilize his rule and establish his legitimacy as emperor. Charlemagne's close ties with the papacy also ensured that the Church played a central role in the governance of his empire, influencing decisions on laws, education, and administration. In the centuries that followed, the relationship between the Church and European monarchs would continue to shape political structures. As rulers sought to maintain their legitimacy through the support of the papacy, while Charlemagne's empire ultimately fragmented after his death, his model of governance left a lasting mark on Europe. His centralization of power, use of royal oversight, and investment in education helped to create a more organized and stable society. His approach to governance provided a blueprint for future European rulers who would continue to draw on his system of administration. Even after the fall of the Carolingian Empire, Charlemagne's influence could be seen in the development of the Holy Roman Empire and the political structure of medieval Europe. Moreover, Charlemagne's legacy extended beyond his immediate successors. The idea of a unified Christian Europe, with a strong monarch at the head of a vast empire, remained a powerful vision for later generations. The concept of a Holy Roman Empire, which would emerge after Charlemagne's death, was rooted in the political and religious framework that he had established. In many ways, Charlemagne's reign set the stage for the political and religious developments that would shape Europe for the next 1,000 years. In conclusion, Charlemagne's influence on European governance was profound and enduring. His efforts to centralize power, promote education, standardize laws, and integrate the church into governance helped to create a more stable and unified Europe. The political structures he established provided a model for future rulers, and his legal and administrative reforms laid the groundwork for the development of medieval European states. Charlemagne's legacy in governance continues to be felt in the systems of law, administration, and political thought that emerged in Europe after his death. The Holy Roman Empire, a political entity that Charlemagne helped to establish in 800, is often considered one of his greatest legacies. While Charlemagne's own empire would disintegrate after his death, the idea of a Christian empire, with a central monarch leading both secular and religious realms, would endure. The Holy Roman Empire would become a significant political force in Europe, and its legacy can be traced directly to Charlemagne's vision of a united Christian Europe. Charlemagne's coronation as Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Leo III on Christmas Day in 800 marked a pivotal moment in European history. The act symbolized the revival of the Roman Empire in the West, which had fallen centuries earlier with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in 476. However, Charlemagne's empire was not a direct continuation of the Roman Empire, but rather a new creation that sought to unite Christian Europe under one ruler, linking the secular monarchy with the authority of the Christian Church. By accepting the imperial crown, Charlemagne was positioning himself not only as the ruler of the Franks, but also as the protector of Christendom. With the Pope's blessing granting divine legitimacy to his rule, the idea of a Holy Roman Empire, however, was not without controversy. The Byzantine Empire, based in Constantinople, considered itself the true heir to the Roman legacy, and Charlemagne's coronation was seen as a direct challenge to Byzantine authority. Empress Irene of Constantinople was outraged by the Pope's decision to crown Charlemagne, as she felt that the title of emperor should belong to the Byzantine emperor. Nevertheless, Charlemagne's reign marked the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire's influence on the political landscape of Europe. Over time, the Holy Roman Empire would grow to encompass vast territories, including parts of modern-day Germany, Italy, and beyond. Charlemagne's establishment of the Holy Roman Empire had profound implications for the future of European governance. The notion of a Christian empire ruled by a divinely appointed monarch would serve as a model for later European rulers. Charlemagne's vision of a unified Europe under one Christian leader would influence future monarchs, especially those who sought to unite the various kingdoms of Europe and claim the mantle of the Holy Roman Emperor. In the centuries following Charlemagne's death, the Holy Roman Empire would become a central institution in European politics. The emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, while often fragmented in terms of actual political control, continued to uphold the idea of a Christian empire. They were seen as the guardians of Christianity in Europe, tasked with protecting the Church and ensuring the unity of Christendom. This vision of an empire that was both religious and political would shape European thought for centuries, particularly during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. However, the Holy Roman Empire, as established by Charlemagne, was not without its challenges. One of the primary difficulties faced by later emperors was the decentralized nature of the empire. The vast size of Charlemagne's empire, coupled with its diverse population and territories, made it difficult to govern effectively. The division of Charlemagne's empire after his death into separate kingdoms, his grandson's territories only added to the complexity of maintaining centralized control. Despite these challenges, the legacy of the Holy Roman Empire endured, and its influence extended far beyond Charlemagne's time. The idea of a Christian monarch ruling over a unified European realm persisted throughout the Middle Ages, influencing the political structure of Europe. The concept of a Holy Roman Emperor continued to hold symbolic power, even if the emperor's actual authority was often limited by the political realities of the time. The Holy Roman Empire also played a key role in the development of European feudalism. Charlemagne's empire was characterized by a system of vassalage, in which local lords pledged allegiance to the emperor in exchange for land and protection. This feudal system, which was further developed in the centuries following Charlemagne's death, became the dominant political and social structure of medieval Europe. The emperor's authority was exercised through a network of vassals and local lords, and the empire itself was often fragmented into smaller, semi-autonomous regions. This system of feudal governance would shape European politics for much of the Middle Ages, with local lords wielding significant power over their territories while maintaining loyalty to the emperor. Charlemagne's legacy also extended to the development of European religious institutions. As the protector of the Christian faith, Charlemagne played a pivotal role in strengthening the Church's position in Europe. His alliance with the Pope and his support for the spread of Christianity helped to solidify the Church's authority across Europe. Charlemagne's reign marked the beginning of a period in which the Church would play a central role in European governance, with popes and monarchs working together to shape the political landscape of the continent. The relationship between the emperor and the Pope, which was forged during Charlemagne's reign, would become a defining feature of European politics for centuries. Although the Holy Roman Empire eventually fragmented into smaller kingdoms, its influence on European governance and culture endured. The idea of a Christian monarch ruling over a unified empire remained a powerful symbol, and many European monarchs sought to claim the mantle of the Holy Roman Emperor. Charlemagne's legacy as the first Holy Roman Emperor continues to shape European political thought, even as the empire itself evolved and changed over time. In conclusion, Charlemagne's establishment of the Holy Roman Empire was one of his most enduring contributions to European history. By reviving the idea of a Christian empire, Charlemagne created a political and religious framework that would influence European governance for centuries. The Holy Roman Empire, while not a direct continuation of the ancient Roman Empire, became a central institution in medieval Europe, shaping the political, religious, and cultural landscape of the continent. Charlemagne's legacy as the first Holy Roman Emperor continues to be celebrated as one of the most significant milestones in European history. Charlemagne's reign was deeply intertwined with the Christian Church, and his relationship with the Pope was one of the cornerstones of his success. Charlemagne understood that his legitimacy as a ruler was closely linked to the Church, and he worked tirelessly to strengthen both his position and the influence of Christianity across his empire. His alliance with the Pope was not only political, but also religious, and it would shape the future of European governance and the Christian faith for centuries. In 800, Charlemagne's relationship with the Church reached its zenith when Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This was a momentous event, as it symbolized the fusion of the spiritual and secular realms. Charlemagne was no longer just the king of the Franks; he was now the emperor of a Christian empire, with divine legitimacy granted by the Pope. This coronation marked the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire, which would have a profound influence on European politics for the next millennium. Charlemagne's relationship with the Pope was also a strategic one. Throughout his reign, he provided military support to the papacy, particularly during times of political instability in Italy. In return, the Pope offered Charlemagne his blessing, which further solidified Charlemagne's authority as a Christian ruler. Charlemagne was aware that the Pope's support was crucial for maintaining control over his empire and for gaining the loyalty of his Christian subjects. In addition to his political alliance with the Pope, Charlemagne worked to strengthen the role of the Church within his empire. He understood that Christianity was not just a religion, but a unifying force capable of binding his diverse empire together. To that end, he supported the spread of Christianity through missionary work, particularly among the pagan Saxons. Charlemagne's efforts to convert the Saxons were both military and religious. He waged a brutal campaign to force the Saxons to adopt Christianity, believing that it was the key to creating a unified Christian Europe. This conversion was, in many ways, a testament to Charlemagne's commitment to the Christian faith and his vision of a Christian empire. Charlemagne also sought to reform the Christian Church in his empire. He worked to standardize religious practices, ensuring that the liturgy and ecclesiastical procedures were consistent throughout his realm. This standardization helped to bring unity to the Christian Church in Europe, which had been fragmented and inconsistent in its practices. Charlemagne's reforms included the promotion of the Benedictine monastic rule, which emphasized discipline and education. He established monasteries and schools across his empire, ensuring that clergy were well-educated and capable of spreading Christian teachings effectively. Despite his deep devotion to the Church, Charlemagne's relationship with the Pope was not always smooth. The Pope, as the head of the Church, held significant influence, and Charlemagne had to navigate the delicate balance of power between the Church and the monarchy. There were times when Charlemagne had to assert his authority over the Pope, especially when he felt that the Pope's actions were undermining his rule. However, these instances were rare. Charlemagne was generally able to maintain a harmonious relationship with the papacy. Charlemagne's alliance with the Pope and his promotion of Christianity had a lasting impact on European history. The idea of the divine right of kings, which Charlemagne helped to establish, has become a central theme in European monarchies for centuries to come. Rulers would continue to seek the Pope's blessing in order to legitimize their authority, and the relationship between the Church and the monarchy would be a defining feature of medieval European politics. Charlemagne's reign marked the beginning of the symbiotic relationship between the Church and the state, which would shape the political and religious landscape of Europe for the next 1,000 years. In conclusion, Charlemagne's relationship with the Church and the Pope was one of the most important aspects of his reign. His alliance with the papacy helped to legitimize his rule and solidify his position as the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne's efforts to spread Christianity, standardize religious practices, and reform the Church within his empire had a lasting impact on the development of Christianity in Europe. His reign marked the beginning of a new era in European history, one in which the Church would play a central role in both spiritual and political life. Charlemagne's influence extended far beyond the borders of his own empire. As a ruler of a vast Christian realm, he understood the importance of diplomacy and the role it played in securing alliances, ensuring peace, and maintaining his empire's stability. His diplomatic efforts spanned across Europe and beyond as he sought to foster relationships with other kingdoms and empires. His approach to diplomacy was multifaceted, using both military might and strategic alliances to advance his vision of a united Christian Europe. One of Charlemagne's most important diplomatic relationships was with the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, considered itself the continuation of the Roman Empire, and its rulers viewed Charlemagne's coronation as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 800 as a challenge to their authority. Empress Irene of Constantinople was particularly displeased with the Pope's decision to crown Charlemagne, as it undermined her own claim to the imperial title. However, Charlemagne was able to use diplomacy to bridge the gap between the Frankish and Byzantine courts. He sought to establish peaceful relations with the Byzantine Empire, recognizing that a strong diplomatic relationship with Constantinople would be beneficial for both sides. Charlemagne's diplomacy with the Byzantine Empire was characterized by mutual respect and a shared interest in preserving the Christian faith. In 812, Charlemagne and the Byzantine Emperor Michael I signed a treaty that recognized each other's authority and sovereignty. Helped to secure Charlemagne's position as a legitimate ruler in the eyes of the Byzantine Empire and solidified his role as a protector of Christendom. The treaty also marked the beginning of a diplomatic and cultural exchange between the two empires, which would continue for centuries. Charlemagne's diplomatic efforts were not limited to the Byzantine Empire. He also sought to build alliances with other European powers, including the Anglo-Saxon Kingdom of Wessex. In the late 8th century, the Anglo-Saxon king Offa of Mercia sent an embassy to Charlemagne, seeking to establish diplomatic ties. Charlemagne responded by sending his own envoys, and the two kingdoms exchanged gifts and promises of mutual support. This alliance was crucial for Charlemagne, as it helped to secure the western borders of his empire and protect against potential Viking invasions. The relationship with Wessex also fostered cultural exchange, as Charlemagne's court became a center for learning, attracting scholars from across Europe. In addition to his diplomatic relations with other Christian kingdoms, Charlemagne also engaged with the Muslim world. During his reign, the Islamic Caliphate was a powerful force in the Mediterranean. With its influence stretching from Spain to the Middle East, Charlemagne recognized the importance of maintaining peaceful relations with the Muslim rulers, particularly those in Spain. The relationship between Charlemagne and the Muslim rulers of Spain was largely based on mutual respect and trade. Charlemagne sought to ensure that his empire's southern borders were secure, and he negotiated with the Muslim rulers to avoid conflict and encourage economic exchange. This diplomacy was particularly important for maintaining stability in the Iberian Peninsula, where both Christian and Muslim kingdoms coexisted. One of Charlemagne's most famous diplomatic feats was his successful negotiation with the Avars, a nomadic group who had settled in what is now Hungary. The Avars had long been a threat to Charlemagne's empire, and their raids had disrupted trade and destabilized the region. In 803, Charlemagne negotiated a peace treaty with the Avars, which allowed the Frankish Empire to secure its eastern borders and maintain stability. This treaty was a testament to Charlemagne's diplomatic skill, as he was able to avoid a costly military conflict while securing his empire's borders. Charlemagne's diplomatic approach was also marked by his commitment to spreading Christianity. As part of his efforts to unify Europe under Christian rule, Charlemagne used diplomacy to promote the Christian faith and encourage conversions. His relationship with the Pope was central to this mission, as the papacy played a key role in the spread of Christianity throughout Europe. Charlemagne's efforts to convert the Saxons, Lombards, and other pagan tribes were not only military campaigns, but also diplomatic initiatives aimed at bringing these peoples into the Christian fold. By forging alliances with Christian rulers and spreading the influence of the Church, Charlemagne helped to create a unified Christian Europe. Charlemagne's diplomatic efforts also had a lasting impact on the political structure of Europe. His reign marked the beginning of a new era in European diplomacy, where the role of the monarch was not limited to military conquest, but also included managing complex relationships with other kingdoms and empires. Charlemagne's use of diplomacy to secure alliances, maintain peace, and promote Christianity set the stage for the development of modern European diplomacy, which would continue to evolve over the centuries. In conclusion, Charlemagne's diplomacy was a key element of his reign. Through his strategic alliances, treaties, and negotiations, he was able to secure the borders of his empire, promote Christianity, and maintain peace with neighboring kingdoms and empires. Charlemagne's diplomatic skills helped to shape the political landscape of medieval Europe and laid the foundation for the development of European diplomacy in the centuries to come. His ability to balance military power with diplomatic efforts was one of the defining features of his reign and helped to ensure the long-term success of his empire. Charlemagne's reign was not only marked by military conquest and religious reform, but also by significant economic developments. As a ruler of a vast empire, he recognized the importance of a strong and stable economy to support the military, the administration, and the welfare of his people. Charlemagne's economic policies helped to lay the foundations for the prosperity of his empire and contributed to the Carolingian Renaissance, a period of cultural and intellectual revival. One of Charlemagne's primary economic achievements was his reform of the currency system. Before his reign, the Frankish kingdom had experienced a period of economic instability, with a lack of uniformity in currency and trade practices. Charlemagne recognized that a stable and standardized currency was essential for promoting trade, collecting taxes, and ensuring economic stability. He introduced a new silver coin called the denier, which became the standard currency throughout his empire. This reform not only facilitated trade within the empire, but also improved the efficiency of taxation and the management of resources. Charlemagne's coinage reforms were part of a broader effort to stimulate economic growth and development. He understood that a thriving economy was crucial for the success of his empire, and he took steps to improve agricultural production, increase trade, and promote infrastructure development. Under his rule, agricultural productivity improved, thanks in part to Charlemagne. Support for the expansion of new lands for farming and the redistribution of land to loyal vassals. He also promoted the use of the manorial system, in which large estates were worked by peasants and managed by local lords. This system of land management provided a stable base for food production and helped to ensure the long-term economic stability of the empire. Trade also flourished during Charlemagne's reign, as his empire was strategically located between the Mediterranean and northern Europe. Charlemagne's central position allowed for the exchange of goods from both the east and the west. He promoted the development of commercial routes and encouraged trade with the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic Caliphate, and other European kingdoms. The growth of trade networks helped to create economic interdependence between different regions and fostered the spread of new ideas, technologies, and products. Charlemagne also took steps to improve the infrastructure necessary for trade, such as repairing and building roads, bridges, and ports, which facilitated the movement of goods and people across the empire. In addition to stimulating trade, Charlemagne's economic policies helped to create a more organized and centralized administration. His establishment of the Missi Dominici royal envoys sent to oversee local officials and ensure that the laws were being enforced allowed him to monitor economic activity and ensure that resources were being properly allocated. This system of oversight also helped to prevent corruption and ensured that the empire's resources were used efficiently. Charlemagne's focus on centralizing control over economic affairs helped to create a more unified and stable empire, which was essential for long-term prosperity. Charlemagne's reign also saw the growth of urban centers. As cities and towns became hubs of commerce, culture, and administration. These urban centers were essential for the economic and cultural development of the empire, as they provided a space for artisans, merchants, and intellectuals to come together and exchange ideas. Charlemagne's support for the development of urban areas helped to foster a more complex and sophisticated economy, as well as a vibrant cultural and intellectual life. The prosperity of Charlemagne's empire was not limited to trade and agriculture. It also extended to the development of a robust banking system. Charlemagne took steps to establish a system of credit and banking that allowed merchants to conduct business more efficiently. This system helped to promote economic growth by making it easier for people to buy and sell goods, invest in businesses, and manage their finances. Charlemagne's support for the development of financial institutions helped to lay the foundation for the future growth of European banking and commerce. Charlemagne's economic reforms were essential for the success and longevity of his empire. They provided a stable economic foundation that allowed the empire to flourish, supporting its military, administrative, and cultural achievements. His coinage reforms, support for agriculture and trade, focus on infrastructure development helped to create an economic system that was efficient, sustainable, and capable of supporting the needs of his vast empire. Despite the challenges posed by his empire's size and diversity, Charlemagne's economic policies were largely successful in creating a more unified and prosperous realm. His reign marked a period of economic growth that would continue in the centuries that followed, and his legacy can be seen in the continued development of trade, commerce, and banking in medieval Europe. Charlemagne's economic reforms were not just about increasing wealth. They were about creating a system of governance that supported the well-being of his people and ensured the stability of his empire for future generations. In conclusion, Charlemagne's economic reforms played a critical role in the success of his empire. His efforts to stabilize the currency, promote trade, and improve agricultural productivity laid the foundations for the Carolingian Renaissance and the long-term prosperity of Europe. Charlemagne's economic policies, combined with his military, religious, and administrative reforms, helped create a unified, stable, and prosperous empire that left a lasting impact on European history. His reign marks a key turning point in the development of medieval European economies, and his legacy continues to influence economic thought and practice today. Charlemagne's military prowess and strategic acumen were central to his success in building one of the most powerful empires in medieval Europe. His military campaigns, though often brutal, were essential for expanding and securing the territories that became part of the Carolingian Empire. Charlemagne understood that a strong military was necessary not only for conquest, but also for maintaining control over his diverse empire. Over the course of his reign, Charlemagne waged several key military campaigns that extended his empire's boundaries, solidified his rule, and spread Christianity across Europe. One of Charlemagne's most significant military campaigns was his long-running conflict with the Saxons, a Germanic tribe living to the north of his empire. The Saxons had long resisted Frankish control, and Charlemagne recognized that their conquest was essential for the stability of his empire. The Saxon Wars, which spanned from 772 to 804, were characterized by brutal fighting, forced conversions to Christianity, and the eventual absorption of the Saxons into Charlemagne's empire. The campaign was marked by several key victories, including the capture of the Saxon stronghold of Eresburg, where Charlemagne destroyed a pagan shrine. However, the Saxon Wars were also marked by heavy resistance and violent reprisals, including the infamous massacre of Verdun in 782, where Charlemagne ordered the execution of 4,500 Saxons who had rebelled against forced conversions. Despite the heavy toll of the Saxon Wars, Charlemagne's victory secured the northern borders of his empire and helped to bring Christianity to the Saxons. The forced conversion of the Saxons, though controversial, was a crucial part of Charlemagne's strategy to unite his empire under one Christian faith. By 804, after nearly 3 decades of fighting, the Saxons were fully incorporated into Charlemagne's empire. Their lands became part of the Carolingian realm. Charlemagne's military campaigns were not limited to the Saxons. He also waged successful wars against the Lombards in Italy. The Lombards had established a kingdom in northern Italy, and Charlemagne's rise to power presented a challenge to their dominance in the region. In 774, Charlemagne marched into Italy to protect the Pope, who was under threat from the Lombard king, Desiderius. Charlemagne defeated the Lombards and took control of their kingdom, further expanding his empire into Italy. Charlemagne's victory over the Lombards also had significant religious implications, as it further solidified his relationship with the Pope and reinforced his position as the protector of Christianity in the West. In addition to his conquests in the north and south, Charlemagne also expanded his empire eastward, defeating the Avars, a nomadic group that had settled in the region of modern-day Hungary. Charlemagne's campaign against the Avars was part of his broader effort to secure the eastern borders of his empire and protect his territories from external threats. By 796, Charlemagne had successfully defeated the Avars and incorporated their lands into his empire, further extending his control over Central Europe. The conquest of the Avars was one of Charlemagne's final military campaigns, and it helped to secure the eastern frontiers of his empire. Charlemagne's military campaigns were not only about territorial expansion, they were also about maintaining control over the empire's vast and diverse lands. As his empire grew, Charlemagne faced the challenge of managing a vast array of peoples, cultures, and territories. His military successes allowed him to consolidate his rule, but they also required him to maintain a strong military presence throughout the empire. Charlemagne built a network of fortifications and military outposts along the empire's borders, ensuring that his army could respond quickly to any threats. He also relied on a system of local lords, who were given military responsibilities in exchange for loyalty and land. This decentralized system of military organization allowed Charlemagne to maintain control over his empire without having to rely on a large standing army. Charlemagne's military leadership was characterized by his personal involvement in campaigns, his strategic vision, and his ability to inspire loyalty in his soldiers. He led his armies into battle, often at the front lines, and his presence on the battlefield was a symbol of his commitment to the empire. Charlemagne's soldiers were fiercely loyal to him, and they saw him not just as a king, but as a warrior who shared in their hardships. His ability to command the loyalty of his troops, combined with his strategic use of alliances, fortifications, and local lords, was key to his military success. Charlemagne's reign marked the height of Carolingian military power, and his military campaigns helped to shape the political and territorial landscape of medieval Europe. While his empire would eventually fragment after his death, Charlemagne's military achievements left a lasting legacy. His conquests laid the foundations for the Holy Roman Empire and established the Carolingian dynasty as one of the most powerful ruling families in European history. In conclusion, Charlemagne's military campaigns were a crucial part of his success as a ruler. His victories against the Saxons, Lombards, and Avars expanded his empire and secured its borders, while his strategic use of military organization and local lords helped maintain control over his diverse realm. Charlemagne's military prowess, combined with his ability to inspire loyalty and command his armies, allowed him to create one of the most powerful empires in medieval Europe. His military legacy would continue to influence European warfare and politics for centuries after his death. Charlemagne's reign marked the beginning of a significant cultural revival in Western Europe, known as the Carolingian Renaissance. At the heart of this intellectual revival was Charlemagne's commitment to education, learning, and the preservation of knowledge. As an emperor, Charlemagne understood the power of knowledge and education in uniting his empire and ensuring its future stability. By patronizing scholars, establishing schools, and encouraging the study of classical texts, Charlemagne laid the groundwork for the intellectual and cultural developments of the Middle Ages. Charlemagne's interest in education was not based on personal ambition, but rather on his belief that an educated clergy and ruling class were essential for the imparting of his empire. Early in his reign, Charlemagne recognized that the Carolingian Empire was vast and diverse, spanning many different regions and peoples. He saw the need for a unified intellectual and cultural framework to ensure loyalty to the crown and to create a sense of cohesion across the empire. Education, he believed, was a key instrument in achieving this goal. One of Charlemagne's most important contributions to the Carolingian Renaissance was the establishment of the palace school in his court at Aachen. This school became the center of intellectual life in his empire and attracted some of the most talented scholars of the time, including Alcuin of York, one of the leading intellectuals of the early Middle Ages. Alcuin, a scholar from England, became Charlemagne's chief advisor on matters of education and helped shape the curriculum at the palace school. The focus of education at the palace school was on the liberal arts, which included subjects like grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. These subjects were based on the classical education that had flourished in the Roman Empire and were seen as essential for a well-rounded intellectual formation. By promoting these subjects, Charlemagne sought to revive the classical learning that had been lost during the Dark Ages and to prepare a new generation of scholars, clergy, and administrators for leadership roles in his empire. Charlemagne's commitment to education extended beyond the palace school. He sought to establish similar educational institutions throughout his empire, particularly in monasteries and churches. Monasteries, which had long been centers of religious life, became important centers of learning and scholarship during the Carolingian Renaissance. Charlemagne encouraged the founding of monastic schools where young men could study Christian theology, Latin, and the works of ancient philosophers. These schools played a crucial role in preserving knowledge, particularly classical Latin texts that had been neglected during the early Middle Ages. Another key aspect of Charlemagne's educational reforms was the preservation and copying of manuscripts. The early Middle Ages had seen the decline of literacy and the loss of many classical texts, but Charlemagne's support for the monastic copying of manuscripts helped to ensure that the works of the ancient philosophers, historians, and theologians were preserved for future generations. Monks in Charlemagne's empire meticulously copied texts by authors such as Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, and Virgil, as well as early Christian writers such as Augustine and Jerome. This preservation of classical knowledge was crucial for the development of medieval scholarship and laid the foundation for the intellectual achievements of the Renaissance. One of the most significant aspects of Charlemagne's educational reforms was the development of Carolingian minuscule, clear and legible script that replaced the more difficult-to-read scripts of the early Middle Ages. This script made the copying of manuscripts more efficient and helped to standardize written communication across Charlemagne's empire. The development of Carolingian minuscule had a lasting impact on European literacy and manuscript production, and it became the model for many later scripts, including Gothic and Roman scripts. Charlemagne's efforts to promote education also extended to the training of the clergy. He recognized that a well-educated clergy was essential for the proper functioning of the church, and he sought to improve the education of priests and bishops throughout his empire. Charlemagne ordered that every bishopric should have a school for the training of clergy, ensuring that they were well versed in the scriptures and in the proper conduct of religious rituals. This emphasis on clerical education helped to ensure that the church played a central role in the intellectual and cultural life of Charlemagne's empire. Despite these significant achievements, Charlemagne's educational reforms were not without challenges. The vastness and diversity of his empire meant that not all regions had equal access to education, and literacy rates remained low, particularly among the lower classes. Furthermore, the intellectual revival that Charlemagne initiated was largely confined to the elites of his empire, and the general population did not experience the full benefits of the educational reforms. Nevertheless, Charlemagne's efforts to promote education had a profound impact on the future of Europe. His patronage of learning helped to create the foundations for the intellectual developments of the Middle Ages, and the scholars of the Carolingian Renaissance played a key role in the preservation and transmission of knowledge to future generations. In conclusion, Charlemagne's commitment to education and the intellectual revival of his empire was one of the defining features of his reign. His support for scholars, his establishment of educational institutions, and his efforts to preserve classical knowledge laid the foundation for the Carolingian Renaissance and helped to shape the future of European scholarship. Charlemagne's educational reforms not only helped to preserve the intellectual heritage of the ancient world, but also fostered the development of new ideas and a new generation of thinkers who would continue to influence European thought for centuries to come. Charlemagne's empire, at its peak, was one of the largest and most powerful in Europe, stretching from modern-day France to Germany, Italy, and parts of Spain. However, despite Charlemagne's efforts to maintain unity through his reforms, military campaigns, and strategic alliances, his death in 814 left the empire vulnerable to division. The decision to divide the empire among his heirs, an inheritance practice common at the time, resulted in a fragmented political landscape, with long-lasting consequences for the Carolingian dynasty and Europe as a whole. Charlemagne's son, Louis the Pious, succeeded him as emperor. Though Louis had been Charlemagne's conqueror since 813, his reign proved to be less stable and effective than his father's. Louis the Pious inherited a vast and diverse empire that spanned multiple cultural and geographic regions. The challenge of governing such a large empire, especially in the absence of his father's strong central leadership, soon became apparent. Louis struggled to maintain control over the empire's nobles, who had been given significant autonomy during Charlemagne's reign, and his efforts to impose central authority were met with resistance. Louis's reign was also marked by significant familial conflict. The emperor's decision to divide the empire among his sons led to civil war and infighting. After Louis's death in 840, the empire was divided among his three surviving sons, Lotharii, Louis the German, and Charles the Bald. This division, formalized by the Treaty of Verdun in 843, fragmented the Carolingian Empire into three distinct territories: the Middle Kingdom, ruled by Lothair; East Francia, ruled by Louis the German; and West Francia, ruled by Charles the Bald. The Treaty of Verdun is often seen as the formal end of Charlemagne's united empire. This division of the empire had profound consequences for the future of Europe. The East Francia territory, which later evolved into Germany, remained the most politically stable of the three. However, it also faced ongoing struggles with internal divisions and external threats, particularly from the Vikings and other invading groups. The West Francia, which would eventually become the Kingdom of France, also faced internal conflicts, particularly between the nobility and the monarchy. Meanwhile, the Middle Kingdom became a patchwork of territories with shifting borders, leading to constant political instability. This instability marked the end of the Carolingian Empire as a unified political entity. While Charlemagne's empire didn't last beyond his immediate successors, his legacy lived on in various ways. The divisions set in motion by the Treaty of Verdun paved the way for the development of modern European states, particularly France and Germany. The political fragmentation that followed Charlemagne's death also created opportunities for local rulers to gain power, leading to the rise of feudalism as a dominant political system across Europe. Feudalism, a system in which local lords held power over their own territories while owing allegiance to a king or emperor, became a defining feature of European politics in the centuries following Charlemagne's death. The fragmented nature of the Carolingian Empire, combined with external threats such as Viking raids, made it difficult for centralized monarchies to maintain control. As a result, local lords gained more authority and autonomy, which would shape the political structure of medieval Europe. In addition to the rise of feudalism, Charlemagne's division of the empire also led to the strengthening of the Church's power in Europe. As the secular authority of Charlemagne's successors weakened, the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church became increasingly important as stabilizing forces. The Church provided continuity during a time of political fragmentation, and its influence grew throughout the Middle Ages. Charlemagne's relationship with the Church had been foundational to his reign, and even after his empire fractured, the legacy of church-state cooperation continued to shape the political and religious landscape of Europe. Though Charlemagne's empire did not endure in its original form, his vision of a united Christian Europe persisted. The Carolingian Empire had set the stage for the future of Europe, not only in terms of its political boundaries, but also through the establishment of Christianity as the unifying cultural and religious force across the continent. Charlemagne's legacy was felt most strongly in the Holy Roman Empire, which, though politically weak for much of its history, continued to exist until the early 19th century. In conclusion, the division of Charlemagne's empire after his death was a pivotal moment in European history. The Treaty of Verdun marked the beginning of the political fragmentation of Charlemagne's vast empire, leading to the development of modern European states such as France and Germany. While the Carolingian Empire was unable to survive intact, Charlemagne's influence continued to resonate through the rise of feudalism, the strengthening of the Church, and the eventual emergence of the Holy Roman Empire. His legacy as a ruler, military leader, and protector of Christianity continued to shape the political and cultural landscape of Europe for centuries after his death. Charlemagne's reign did not only leave a political and military legacy, it also had a lasting influence on the cultural development of Europe. Under his rule, the Carolingian Renaissance saw a revival of intellectual and cultural life that would profoundly shape the future of Western civilization. Charlemagne's patronage of education, the arts, and the preservation of classical knowledge ensured that his empire became a beacon of learning in the early NES. His legacy in this regard would lay the foundations for the intellectual and artistic developments that followed in later centuries. One of Charlemagne's key cultural achievements was the establishment of a system of education that transcended the court of the emperor and reached throughout his empire. Charlemagne recognized the importance of an educated clergy and bureaucracy to maintain order and continuity within his vast kingdom. Under the guidance of Alcuin of York, Charlemagne invited some of the best scholars from across Europe to teach at his palace school in Aachen. The palace school became a center of learning, where subjects such as grammar, rhetoric, logic, and theology were taught. This intellectual revival marked the beginning of the Carolingian Renaissance, which would go on to influence the development of education and scholarship in medieval Europe. Charlemagne's emphasis on education was not limited to the elite, but extended to the church and monasteries as well. He understood that the future of Christianity depended on an educated clergy who could read the Bible and administer the sacraments effectively. He ordered that every bishopric and abbey in his empire should have a school for training clergy. Charlemagne's educational reforms were instrumental in the preservation of Christian knowledge. In classical literature, as many manuscripts from the ancient world were copied by monks in the monastic scriptoriums during this time. The revival of learning under Charlemagne was also marked by a renewed interest in the works of ancient Roman and Greek philosophers, as well as early Christian writings. The preservation of these works, many of which had been lost during the chaotic centuries after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, is crucial to the cultural development of Europe. Classical Latin, which had declined in use over the centuries, was revived as the language of scholarship, helping to unify Charlemagne's vast empire through a common intellectual language. Charlemagne's reign also saw a flowering of the visual arts and architecture. The period known as the Carolingian Renaissance saw the construction of impressive churches, palaces, and monasteries across Charlemagne's empire. The Palatine Chapel at Aachen, commissioned by Charlemagne himself, is perhaps the most iconic example of this architectural revival. The chapel was inspired by the Byzantine style and became the model for later medieval church architecture in Europe. The development of illuminated manuscripts, their elaborate designs and vibrant colors also flourished during this period. These beautifully decorated texts were not only works of religious devotion, but also artistic achievements that helped preserve the culture and ideas of the ancient world. Charlemagne's religious reforms played a central role in his cultural legacy. Efforts to standardize Christian practices across his empire helped solidify Christianity as the unifying force of European culture. Charlemagne worked closely with the Pope to ensure that religious practices, including the liturgy and ecclesiastical laws, were consistent throughout his empire. This religious unity laid the foundation for the dominance of Christianity in Europe throughout the medieval period. In addition to his educational and religious reforms, Charlemagne's influence on European culture can be seen in the growth of trade and commerce within his empire. Charlemagne's efforts to stabilize the economy by introducing a standardized currency system and improving infrastructure facilitated the exchange of goods and ideas across Europe. Charlemagne's empire became a hub of commercial activity. Connecting the Mediterranean with the North Sea and the heart of Europe, the increased trade helped to foster cultural exchange, bringing new ideas, technologies, and artistic influences into his empire. Charlemagne's cultural legacy can also be seen in the long-lasting impact of his empire. on the development of feudalism and the political structures of medieval Europe. Though his empire fragmented after his death, the idea of a centralized Christian monarchy, supported by an educated clergy and a network of local lords, became a model for future European rulers. The decentralized system of vassalage and loyalty to a king or emperor would shape the political landscape of Europe for centuries to come. Charlemagne's influence extended far beyond his own reign. In the centuries after his death, he became a symbol of Christian kingship and an ideal for later European rulers. The Holy Roman emperors, who claimed the mantle of Charlemagne, sought to emulate his vision of a united Christian Europe. And his legacy remained a touchstone for medieval rulers who sought to bring peace and unity to their realms. Charlemagne's influence on European culture, education, and governance would continue to be felt throughout the Middle Ages and beyond, cementing his place as one of the most important figures in European history. In conclusion, Charlemagne's cultural legacy is vast and far-reaching. Through his efforts to promote education, preserve classical knowledge, and support the arts, he helped lay the foundations for the intellectual and cultural development of medieval Europe. His reign marked the beginning of the Carolingian Renaissance, which would have a lasting impact on the future of European scholarship, art, and architecture. Charlemagne's influence on European governance, education, and religion set the stage for the future development of Europe, ensuring that his legacy would endure for centuries to come.